So this video originally started as like a recruiting video to show how to get a decently ranked class after the patch. I was going to pick a team with awful my school grades and show you that you can take even that team and get a top 25 or 35 class, sign 5 stars. But in the course of doing that, I kind of went down a few rabbit holes and I realized that there's a lot of things that are just not explained to you in this game, and a lot of things are left vague, so I wanted to do some research. The overall goal of today's video is to look a little bit deeper into a few mechanics of College Football 25, mainly just things that they don't really explain or they just give you no tangible numbers whatsoever. And just so we're on the same page, this is like a little list of things that I've researched and what I'm going to cover. The first thing is going to be influence from hard or soft sales and the cutoff points of that. Then we're going to take a look at the motivator ability tree. Specifically, we're going to look at off-season training, and then I'm going to talk about composure or like hot and cold players for a minute. And then we're going to look at the architect ability tree. This is a big reason why I made this video, and that's going to be going into skill caps, removing skill caps, player progression, and things of that nature. And all I'm going to ask of you is that if you learn something that you haven't seen anywhere else, maybe this is an informative video to you or the discussion is interesting, just go look at my Dynasty rebuilds, check that out. I'm not your dad, I'm not going to tell you to subscribe, but I'm just a guy with less than 100 subs trying to make it out here, so I would appreciate it. So let's just get started. When you get a recruit to their top 5 stage, you unlock the hard sell and soft sell pitches. Essentially, each recruit has 3 default interests they like. You uncover them through spending time on them during the season, and you'll use those interests compared to your my school grades to make the pitch. First, we're going to look at this recruit. The interest here is 2 A- and an A+. Pretty solid match for what the recruit has compared to what our school has to offer. And I'm going to do the best I can here. We're going to average it out. I'm going to say that this is an A overall pitch for these 3 ratings combined. Now you can see that in both instances here, the soft sell compared to the plus 25 basic option, the contact friends and family, and then the hard sell compared to the plus 50 send the house option, they just crush it. They knock it out of the park here. They're both essentially double the influence over the basic pitches. And the really important thing to remember is that the hard and soft sells are actually cheaper than the comparative options, the contact friends and family or send the house. So it just makes them that much more efficient. Now, if you factored in adding that plus 5 pitch to the soft sell or like the plus 10 to the hard sell, the difference here would be massive. So the main goal of showing that is to show you just how good a hard or soft sell can be. But if you're like me and you play a lot of bad schools, what's a lot more interesting to find out is when these are not worth it and what would be the cutoff point to where you shouldn't be even looking at these. And I found it for you guys. Now here it is. If you look at the interest here compared to the grades, this is a pitch with 2 B- grades and a C+. And for the sake of making it easier, I'm just going to call this a B- overall grade. And I think logically, if you think about it, having 2 grades that are in the green and the other one being pretty much as close to green as it can get without being green, you would think that it would be a pretty solid pitch, but it's just not the case. So here's the data, and remember that chart we showed earlier for the A overall pitch? You can see here that even the hard and soft sales are pretty far behind on their own, even if you add like the plus 5 social media to the soft sell, or if you add a DM plus 10 to the hard sell, they are still just a little bit behind the basic pitches. And this, like a lot of stuff we'll talk about in the video, is pretty disappointing. This means if you don't at least have 3 green grades, you won't even break even. And if you want to have like any significant boost in influence, that means you probably need to at least have a B total overall pitch. This means that lower level schools that maybe just have like C+ or lower grades should pretty much never use these hard or soft sales. And I think this was some really good information to learn. When diving deeper into the motivator tree, tier 3 is the most interesting thing to me. It gives you an off-season training boost, and once again, this is really vague and it really requires you to understand how this game handles training at all. And before we jump in, I think we all need to be on the same page here. We need to know a couple of things about training in this game. Number 1, this is not like past NCAAs. At the bare minimum, when you go to that training screen, they won't even tell you how much a player improved, and if you didn't screenshot it or maybe write down your players overall before training, you would just have to kind of guess or maybe just not care about it too much. Now, I don't want to go on a tangent, but not giving you the total number that a player improved in off-season training, it's a terrible design choice, but at the end of the day, we can only work with what we got. Now, second is that, this is the important thing, listen close to this, training is completely random. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It doesn't matter if the player has an elite dev trait or someone has a normal dev trait, it's just completely and totally random. Good school, bad school, school, there just isn't any method to predict how these overalls go up. So with that in mind, base your expectations off of that. Now for these tests, I picked like a handful of recruits. I recorded their overall, their seniority, their dev trait, just to see if maybe there was any correlation. I made a save point, and I recorded the results of training about a dozen times with the motivator ability, and then about a dozen times without it, just to see if it made a difference. Now I'm gonna pull up this chart here, but the recruits I settled on was Sellers. He's a junior quarterback, impact dev, and he also had a really solid season going into this. And then I picked the freshman backup, Belore. He has a star dev trait. And I did pick Nick Harbor because you really can't talk about South Carolina without mentioning this genetic freak, but he's an impact dev trait senior. And at the end here, I have two freshman linemen. Simple has an elite dev trait, while Goats is more like the control here. He has a normal dev trait. Now, if we look at the data without the tier 3 motivator perk, it just lets you know a little bit more about training in general. It was very, very random, but for some reason, Sellers here was the only consistent one. He only went up by 3 a couple of times, and for the most part, he never improved at all. There was so many zeros in the dozen or so tests that I did, so him having a great year on the field last year didn't really matter for off-season training. Most of his simulations just came up +0. And if you look at the end here, Sellers didn't even go up a point on average. He only had a 0.75 average, a high of 3, a low of 0. The backup Belore, he averaged 4.13 points. He had a high of 6, low of 0. Harbor averaged 3.38, high of 7, low of 0. Simple, 5.13 average, high of 9, low of 0. And our normal dev trait control Goats actually improved the most with an average of 5.75, high of 7, low of 4. Pretty consistent for the most part. Now we can flip over to the results with the motivator training boost. And with Sellers, once again, he was really consistent. Almost every single week he went up +3. There was like a +2 in there or so, but he had a big improvement here. And if you look under that, Belore slightly improved his average as well as his high and low. Nick Harbor actually had worse results with a boost on average, and Simple had a pretty nice gain with a boost. He was up to 6.89 average with a massive high of +14. That's pretty crazy. In the normal dev trait Goats, he went down ever so slightly in average, but he did have a +11 one time in the sims. And if you analyze these numbers, the difference between with and without the boost are interesting. And by interesting, I mean it's kind of insane that it barely made a difference overall. Sellers had the biggest improvement. Simple had an extra 1.76 points on average. And the most interesting thing to me is that 2 of the 5 recruits, they actually improved less with the ability than without it, which is just, it's insanity to me. And I would say overall the differences are very little. You can look at Belore, he only got like 9/100ths of a point more with the boost. And if you look at Ghost, he was 8/100ths less. And when we're looking at hundredths, who really cares? You would just expect to see a significant difference. Now, if you take these numbers, you average them out, it means that with the tier 3 off-season training boost, you average an extra 0.73 points per recruit. It's not even a full whole point. And just to lay it out the best that I can, the best way I can think about it, if you have like an 85-man roster, a full roster, a 0.73 increase means that on average, only around 62 of your 85 players would get an extra point. And I'm sure there's some more nuance here, such as Simple having sims where he got +14, or Goats getting that +11 with the boost. But this has kind of completely changed how I looked at this tree and the perks. I guess the overall potential is a little bit higher, but at the end of the day, it's just random. The best way I can think of explaining it is like the game behind the scenes rolled a D20 and it just went with that result. And when you pick this ability, it just kind of gives you like a really slight +1 modifier to the roll. And just to be thorough here and play devil's advocate for myself, I think it's important to understand that a point of overall means that you likely had to increase multiple skills multiple times to get an increase. So it's hard to really quantify how good it is, but the point of this video is that maybe you can kind of get the ball rolling on a deeper discussion. Now, is this ability worth it? Probably, but in kind of like a random way. Now, you might not get a boost at all in the off season, or you might get lucky, you might see a +14. I still think it's good, but it's just so vague and disappointing how training's handled in this game. I wish they would give you more information. Now, keep it in the motivator tree. I want to keep this part short. I want to look at the tier 2 ability here, and this is me wanting answers over anything else other than me having data and stuff like that. And what this does is let your players stay hot throughout multiple scenarios. And once again, I have to ask, what does being hot actually mean? And this has been a mystery for me for a long time. Now, if you don't believe me, try to search the internet. You can even look at older NCAA games, and there's just no concrete answers. It's really hard to find any information. You can find some people saying that it only only affects like hot routes, audibles, squiggly lines, but there's still no concrete information about it. The absolute best information I can find on this is from the official EA Sports deep dive, and it says the following. This is a verbatim quote. "It's important to note that composure is highly individualized, driven by a player's archetype. For instance, when your players start to cook, a scrambling quarterback will have improved ball security, while a field general will benefit from improved throw accuracy." Now this makes it seem like you'll just get a skill boost, and if you're playing well, that sounds really great. It would make this perk pretty interesting, especially since you can kind of just pick it up on the way to the training boost. But just like the rest of the things in this video, I did test it out. I went into a game with Alabama, and to play now, just so the ratings weren't skewed by things like coordinator boost, I checked out Milroe's stats, I played for a bit, and when he got hot, I took another look and nothing changed. Now from there, EA specifically named field general in that snippet, so I put in the backup Simpson. I got his composure up to hot. I tested once again, but just like Milroe, there was no increases to skills. Now at this point, my whole offense had pretty much filled out their composure. I looked through the depth chart, nothing really changed. And I can get that maybe some people out there might think that their players play better or worse if they're hot and cold, but playing a few games, specifically testing this out, and then having full dynasty rebuilds under my belt already, I cannot in good conscience say that this makes a notable difference, but I would absolutely love to hear some factual information or have someone maybe point me in the right direction of a resource that would explain it well, because I just don't think it does anything. I saved the best and most interesting data for last, but first, let's talk about player progression. I really do like the way it's handled in this game on like a conceptual level, and I gotta say that I picked the worst team to talk about it with. I'm using South Carolina. I'm gonna show Lenoris Seller here as an example, but under his name there's a black bar, and for some reason EA thought it was a great idea to make South Carolina's progress bar color be just a very, very slightly lighter black, so it's really hard to see. But during games or whatever other means a player can earn experience, this bar is going to fill up, and when the bar's filled, the player is going to get skill points. They're going to be shown in the top right here, and you can see in the power category that's highlighted now, there's another spot. It tells you how many skill points that would require that category to level up. Now this is the gist of player progression, and the consensus for now is that the game just automatically spends skill points on the lowest available category, meaning that if Seller's accuracy costs 7 skill points to level up and he levels up and he has 8 skill points, the game just automatically spends 7 on the lowest category to fill up accuracy. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about skill caps. You can see these little gray slashed out bars. They're on a few of these rating categories here. That means that you can never level up to that point, and in this example, Sellers has the best IQ he can ever achieve because his skill cap stopped him from getting those last 2 boxes filled. So now we're on the same page. Let's talk about the architect skill tree. Now outside of one of the ludicrously expensive top 2 coaching trees that have one ability that lets you have even a chance at removing the skill caps, architect has 2 of these abilities, and from the surface, if you're just looking at it baseline, they seem incredibly powerful, but let's just focus on the first one. This ability gives you the chance of removing a random skill cap when a player levels up. Now once again, this is vague. You have no way of knowing how good it is. Is it a 1% chance? Is it a 15% chance? That would require some testing, and that's what I did. So for these tests, I found like 8 or so players that would level up after simulating a game. I took a screenshot of their skill caps before and compared it next week when they leveled up to see just how things were going, just so we can get a chance. And I gotta say, the results, they were not that great. At one point in testing, I considered that this ability might actually be bugged and simply not work, but eventually, after enough testing, I finally saw a skill capper to be removed. And let's just talk about the numbers. Out of 105 level ups that I looked at, I only seen this skill cap removed 2 times. I'll be the first person in the world to tell you that if you want completely accurate results, you would probably need to test something like this thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of times, just so you would get a really good idea of the exact figure. But in 105 tests, the chance of this ability happening are less than 2%. Now maybe at first glance, you might think, hey, something that occurs roughly 1 out of 53 times doesn't seem that bad. And I really don't want to drop too many statistics or probability numbers on you guys, but it would take you looking at roughly 241 level ups before you hit a 99% probability of seeing this happen. Now the whole point here is that it's a really low chance, and I'd be willing to bet that the second skill cap removing ability in this tree that happens after you win a conference or a national championship probably has the same numbers. And just like with the poor off-season training boost ability earlier, I do think that this is probably likely still worth it, mainly just because how rare it is to see skill caps be able to be removed. I think a better way to maybe think about this outside of the vacuum of that low 1.9% chance is to think of how many people on your roster and how many weeks are in the season and just how many different guys will be leveling up each and every week. And it wouldn't surprise me if there's at least 500 plus level ups throughout the season on an 85-man roster, but I didn't go that far with testing. I just wanted to know like a really rough idea of the chance of removing a skill cap was. That's about all the data I've gathered, and if you've tested anything out, I would love to hear about it. This is a different kind of video. I would much rather play the game and rebuild a program and just have fun that way, but as a lot of you may know, they released the first title patch and it has some god-awful new bugs like not being able to position change new freshmen. Now they hotfixed it for online dynasties, but it looks like offline players will have to wait till the end of August in the best case of scenario for a fix, so I might wait until the end to do another dynasty video. I don't know yet, but I think next time we'll look at some more interesting things like this. I have a few more things. Maybe we'll dive into recruiting post patch. I don't know. Give me some ideas if you want to see a specific team in a dynasty rebuild video. If you want to see another death penalty rebuild video, you just let me know. But I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.